Australia's retailers might well feel they need another government cash handout. The latest retail sales data for April were much weaker than expected, and the Reserve Bank will remain ready to cut interest rates. May explain why retailers were one of the few business groups to welcome the government's budget and plans to compensate households for the carbon tax and school expenses. But ironically, they're blaming fears of a tough budget for today's weak retail numbers. Here's Philip Lasker.
The sale signs are more frequent and stay up for longer, and if they don't work, new signs go up.
Well, the retail sector's one of the weaker sectors in the Australian economy at the moment.
After a strong March result comes the weakest monthly number in nearly a year. Australia's big retailers say consumers were spooked by ongoing turmoil in Europe and the rising cost of living.
We were also seeing some fairly serious language about austerity in the run-up to the federal budget.
Household goods retailers are under siege, particularly those selling electrical appliances.
Some of the weakest components were the department store sales, which is partly, we think, the online story. Households are buying more things online and less things at department stores.
To be fair, online has come from 40% growth rates down to 15% over the course of the last year or so. So a lot faster, but it's also having some slowdown.
People have been spending money on food and in restaurants, and they're also spending it in the resource-rich states of Western Australia and Queensland, which are racing ahead of the national average. Tasmania and Victoria are struggling. But these numbers account for only 30% of spending. It matters not to the retailers.
Across the board, from a retail perspective, whether it be household goods, whether it be other, which is the famous lipstick index, or whether it be, people's willingness to splash out on those little luxuries, all of those things are down. And I think that sends us the message we need to hear.
But the Reserve Bank, which considers interest rates next week, is hearing many different things, including today's construction data.
Where you've got things like falls of around about 2% in construction of new residential, but when you go to engineering, it's up 13.9% in the quarter in real terms. So again, you've got this big difference between what's happening in mining and what's happening in essentially the traditional parts of the Australian economy.
The Reserve Bank Board will be discussing international issues more than anything else, one would think, next Tuesday.
And it's those international issues, more than anything else, that are seen as determining what happens to interest rates.
I think the Reserve will have to do at least another 50 points as they in a couple of months' time, but whether they need to do it straight away, I think, is more doubtful.
Time to wait and see if Europe erupts, and time to assess the impact of the government's budget handouts.